Okay, hi everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with Hannah Underwood from How Might We Community. We're going to be talking about taking on a leadership role at an early age and particularly a trusteeship. So I'm delighted to have Hannah here and I'll let you introduce yourself now.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm the founder of How Might We Community. I'm a general just do-gooder in the data charity space.
Well, delighted that you've taken some time out of your busy schedule to have a conversation today. And I'm really interested to know when you took on your first trustee role.
Yeah, so I've been thinking back, dragging up the old memories, and my first sort of proper governance role was when I was 21, and it was actually with the BBC. So it was the time when they had the BBC Trust, which no longer exists now. But I started in that role as a sort of representative of local radio for Radio Newcastle. So I started in the radio space, and then I moved up to chair that panel. And then I joined the Regional Audience Council, which then started to review all the sort of TV output as well across North East and Cumbria. And then I chaired that panel. And then so every time I sort of like came to the end of my tenure, then I sort of took on another role a bit higher up. And then I ended up in ACE, which sounds very cool, but that was called the Audience Council England. So I sort of represented the North East and Cumbria for the BBC to the trustees of the BBC. And I did that for the whole thing was about 10 years in total, but just sort of, changed roles gradually over time.
So that all sounds like it could be quite intimidating. I think someone at any stage of their career might find that quite a big challenge. And so I guess my question is sort of what motivated you to do so at such a young age?
So I got the opportunity. I was working for a charity. It was my first proper job out of uni for a charity called Common Purpose. And so there's two reasons really why I sort of felt compelled to do this, and also the opportunity presented itself through that charity. So Common Purpose basically pulls together senior decision makers and movers and shakers from a whole variety of different sectors and walks of life. But there'd be like MPs, or there'd be leaders of the council, or CFOs of this, MDs of that. And the idea is to bring them all together to talk about the challenges that the region's facing. And the hope is that by having that sort of diverse discussion, they could start to solve problems. And I ran a version of that, but for young people, sort of 13, 14-year-olds. And they were sort of like the equivalent of those sorts of people, but from 10 different schools. So it was that was really cool, just seeing young people and them expressing their views and their ideas like from an early age. And but the one thing on the grown-ups program is that they used to basically, I just realized that these were like really important people, but they like missed taxis and they left their jumpers, and like they couldn't make things on time, and they spilt soup down their dresses, and like I was just like, these are just like regular people, like, but they're in these really important positions. Like, anyone could do that. So that sort of gave me a bit of confidence in that respect, and also just sort of seeing like how impactful it was for young people to get their voices heard in front of these people. So when the opportunity for the BBC role was presented, I was like, yeah, do you know what, I'm just going to give it a go and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that something can feel very sort of out of your reach, but actually if you kind of just consider that we're all people and people have different contributions, that actually there is a place for you at that table and your view is as valid as anybody else's there with you. So I guess kind of what were the challenges that you faced, or did you see the challenges and just think, actually, I'm going to give this a go? What was your approach to that?
I mean, so I suppose the first challenge that wasn't there was that the Common Purpose, my employer, were really supportive of me taking on that role. So, and they were like used to working with people in governance roles. So I got a lot of support from like my own organisation as well as from the BBC. So that was like, I felt like that was a barrier that could have been in place that just wasn't there. So that was really helpful. In terms of challenges, so I think like from it, so when I first started to chair the local audience council, so, and that, well, I was probably only like 23 or something at the time, and I was like clearly the youngest person in the room. And but I remember feeling like it was really important to me that we had a really diverse group of people there, because the point of the council was to represent the voices of the listenership.
Yes.
And I pushed quite hard for us to recruit this gentleman who was on the autistic spectrum to join the council. And one of the challenges I remember is that I would ask a question and he would give me a very, very literal answer to it.
Right.
So, for example, I would say, how do you choose what radio station you're going to listen to when you get in the car, for example? And he would be like, well, there's this knob and you turn it. And if I want Radio Newcastle, I turn it to 95.4 FM. And I was like, you absolutely answered my question. But that's, I haven't asked it in the right way to elicit sorts of response that I need. So, and there were similar sort of challenges with the different types of people around that table. So I was like, really sort of tried lots of different ways in my own time and with support of the BBC to try and learn how can I, elicit the best responses. And as a chair, it became like moving from like being on the council to being the chair. It became quite clear to me that my own views were actually far less important in that room than the role that I had of eliciting the views of everyone else. So it was like, first of all, it was like learning, oh, actually, I need to like shut up a bit in terms of like putting my own views forward to find, the best way and the best dynamic to promote discussion within the group.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the skill of the chair, to be able to step back and see that, and that different people might need to be brought in at different points in a conversation in different ways. So I think that's kind of, it shows that the skill that you had, but also it feels like you had some really great mentors who saw the talent in you and encouraged you to take on the role. And I wonder whether that actually was a bit of a catalyst to make you actually say yes.
Yes, absolutely. I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome. Even at 45 now, I still like end up in situations I'm like, should I be here? So I think, and especially at that age, but they were actively trying to bring someone into that group who was young. And not only was I sort of 21, but the job that I had was with 13, 14-year-olds. And so I was, not that I was able to like represent all of their views, but it just gave me I felt like I had a stronger position to be able to, put forward views and ideas from a sort of wider catchment than just me and my own brain, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that really well illustrates the responsibility of an organisation when they are including new trustees and recruiting to see that everyone's going to bring something different. And if you're specifically recruiting a particular audience, then there might be new considerations for each person, depending on what they bring and whether it's the first experience of trusteeship and all those other things. But there's a real responsibility to make that welcome a positive experience.
And do you know what? It's not just, so I ran a charity, The Key, for about 16 years. And so I recruited and reported to a board myself for, that whole duration. And actually, a lot of the time, I had trustees come on board and it was their first role, but not necessarily because they were young. These are people who were really influential in their daily life, but they just never considered having a trustee role before. So they also needed support and felt uncomfortable and a bit of, what these responsibilities. And, even though, you might look at their, profile on LinkedIn and go, oh, they're going to smash it. Like there's no, but, they need just as much support as like the younger people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the first time if it isn't the first time you've been a trustee, it might be the first time. There's always a first time to be a trustee of a particular organisation. So that's really, really, really important as well. So you've mentioned probably some of them already, but what were you most what were your proudest successes as a trustee?
In that role, I think what I was really able to do is to properly understand what everyone wanted to get out of those meetings, and I did that every single meeting, so as to really understand, you know, the people in the room, like, who were wanting to contribute their ideas, to make sure that I felt that they had the right platform to do that, and they felt confident enough to do that. But also for, you know, what was going to happen with that information. You know, what being a trustee or an ed or all of these roles, it takes, whether it's voluntary or remunerated, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy and focus. And I always want to know that it's not just a tick box exercise, that stuff is going to happen as a result of the conversations that's happened around that room. And at the BBC in particular, when I was on the ACE council, is, you know, and I'd be presenting to, like, you know, the whole of the, you know, the BBC Trust at that point, and pushing forward the importance of local radio and TV output, and, you know, on having to make presentations, which was like pretty nerve-wracking. But on a number of occasions, like, we managed to save cuts that were prepared, you know, proposed to be happening to local radio, and like cutting off like really vital resources to people who to some, that's their only sort of lifeline. So I felt like real action happened as a result of contributions.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so I guess we've sort of got a real sort of sense of your enthusiasm, your passion, and your talent at being a trustee and in a leadership role. What would you say to someone at the start of their career who might feel they need to wait before considering a trustee position?
I mean, there's never a best time to do it. You're always busy. There's you know, it's like there's never a best time to get married or to have kids or to like move jobs, or, you know, all that sort of stuff. Is like, there is no better time to start than now. And I would stress that, like, particularly right now, I feel that there's a real movement in, like, trustee boards, NED roles, social housing organisations, where there is a massive appetite for diversifying voices on the board, and lived experience in particular is a massively important thing. Like, you are an expert in your lived experience. Like, no one is more expert in that than you. And so if maybe you're approaching your first trustee role, and there's a reason why, you know, either you represent a particular demographic, or you've had particular experiences, or even your particular skill sets, is to think they want that from you. And so, you know, is to sort of like double down and make sure that that's what you give them. But also, my other words of advice would be around, be really clear to yourself about what you want to get out of it. Like, don't feel like this is just a one-way street. You know, every single role that I've taken on, I've done it because there is a particular reason for me. There's like something I want to learn. I want to learn about a particular sector, or, you know, I haven't experienced, you know, governance of like chairing a finance committee. Like, that's something, you know, so and for me it's always around CPD from one perspective or another. But not only being clear with that for yourself, but really articulate that to the people who are recruiting you. Because, and, you know, and I did this at the Key all the time. Whenever we brought new trustees on, I was like, what are you hoping to be like, or to experience, or what change are you hoping might happen for you as a result of joining this board? And then, because I was aware of it, I was able to make sure that happened. So if it was, you know, actually I want to like feel really close to the beneficiaries, or like to see the impact, and, you know, I would make sure I was inviting them to come and sit on panels and meet young people, and, you know, and those sorts of things. Or if it was like, you know, I really want to get into the numbers, then I would have like, you know, they would be my port of call for like impact data and stuff like that. So, you know, just be really clear about it, because it's then you can have fantastic sort of win-win partnerships with the organizations you're giving your time to.
Yeah, completely. Well, I'm so delighted that you've managed to make the time today to have this conversation. And I find your trusteeship and leadership journey incredibly inspiring, and I'm sure that everyone tuning into the conversation today will too. So if you're watching, if you're listening and you're considering a trustee role or just curious about what's involved, please get in touch with us at Community Foundation. There's a lot of support via our Trustee Match programme, and I'd love to guide you towards a rewarding role that meets all of your aspirations, ambitions, and yeah, thanks once again to Hannah. See you
No
soon.
problem. It's been great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.